Good afternoon. I want to welcome everybody here. My name is Dr. John McClanahan, and I am a grateful recovering alcoholic.
Hi, John.
It's good to see everybody. Again, thanks for being here. What we're going to take a look at is a topic that I've done for a number of years and finally wanted to get this on tape. It deals with relapse, the seven-letter dirty word. And I came up with that title for a number of reasons, as hopefully you'll see as we go through this. We've come a long, long way in terms of understanding relapse, the treatment of relapse, understanding relapse prevention and how to deal with that. For a long time, relapse was looked at backwards. We looked at relapse as an event, as a thing, and a thing that really we didn't have much control over. For years, we've also heard people mention this idea that relapse is part of recovery, that it's expected and that kind of, we certainly know that may happen, but we want to do all we can to ward that off. I came up with the title, Seven-Letter Dirty Word, because for years nobody wanted to talk about relapse. There was this sense of if you talked about it, you invited it. So there was this sense of out of sight, out of mind. Even in meetings for years, you would hear people only talk about relapse after somebody had used. And everybody kind of circled the wagons and how was it, what was it like, oh my God, are you okay, was it as bad as they say it is? Nobody ever talked about it beforehand. So again, for years we looked at it as this event. We also looked at relapse in a whole nother way, in the sense of another seven-letter dirty word, unfortunately. Nobody wanted to talk about it because it also kind of connoted or was along the lines of failure. And people over the years took that failure to follow directions, failure to not use, and they internalized it, whether it was family members or the individual themselves, that if you failed, then you must be a failure. And because of that reason, a lot of people didn't want to talk about it either. So again, it was out of sight, out of mind. We know now that's the worst thing we can possibly do. Okay? Relapse is not an event. We need to talk about it. We need to focus on it. Relapse is a process. It's a living, breathing, ongoing situation, and we really need to do all the work we can to kind of recognize it and nip it in the bud before it happens. So what I want to do in this part, I want to take a look at my way of looking at the process of addiction. There's a lot of different ways to do it. They're all good. Some can be very time-consuming. Some can be very short. Some can be a lot of different things. So what we're going to do is kind of take a look at my way of dealing with this. Okay? I'm a firm believer and kind of come from the school of what we call KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. The better and the easier and the shorter the directions, the better chance we have of remembering things. I also like to look at it in a three-part situation because some of you know one of the first things that we struggle with as recovering people is our short-term memory isn't as good as it should be. So all the things that I need and all the things that may be important may not stick right away. So the less I have to remember and the less I have to understand, the better. Again, I look at it as a three-stage process. This has worked for me for a long time and folks that I work with, so I hope you get some use and value out of it. The first stage I like to look at is what I call an unconscious thought. And what I mean by that is it's in there. We refer to ourselves very often as in the sense of once an addict, always an addict. We're wired that way. You know how we are, that type of thing. The unconscious thought just means it's there. Okay? If you look at it in terms of a behavior, one of the things you'll hear people mention early in recovery is sobriety has a lot to do with learning new behaviors, but it also has a lot to do with unlearning old behaviors. And we certainly know that most people understand you never really unlearn anything. What you do is you learn something new to take the place of it, so it's still in there. To give you an example, I do a lot of work with folks that aren't in recovery, other professionals, maybe mental health therapists, that don't have the first-hand experience that some of us do. And for them, I come up with other, and for family members sometimes, I come up with other ways that they can maybe relate to this situation of an unlearned behavior. I want you to go back and think about an activity that you used to do that you don't do anymore. Maybe play a certain sport, ride a bike. In my case, some of you know this example. I used to, like so many people my age, back in the 60s I was in a band and I was a bass player. And I haven't played since probably 1970. Okay? Now, I still have my bass. I still have been in touch with some of the guys that I used to play with. And every so often we'll have this bright idea of, wouldn't it be great to get back together and do like a reunion concert, like anybody would really care. But yeah, we've talked about it, and I thought, that would be a wonderful thing. Now, none of us have played a lick since 1970, except for one guy. One guy in the band went on and he plays professionally, and it's his career. For us, it was a nice time, it was extra money, it was fun, and that was kind of the end of that. If we ever get back together again, I can guarantee you one thing. The first time we play, it's going to stink. Okay? None of us have played. Give us a couple of times, and it'll get a little better and a little better. I haven't forgotten how to play. I just haven't used it. It'll be a little rusty. It'll come back to me. To give you another example of how you don't ever unlearn something, and I'll show you where this is going in terms of recovery. Years and years ago, this is something some of you might have had some experience with, there was a TV show on Sunday mornings called Mass for Shut-ins. And it was basically the Catholic Mass on TV. And it was for people who were infirmed or sick or transportation problems, couldn't get to church. And you could watch Mass and it kind of fulfilled your obligation and that kind of thing. One thing I do remember about that period was every Sunday morning, my brother and sister and I, trying to convince my mother that we were too sick to go to church. We'll just watch it on TV and it's okay. The Pope said it was all right. She never bought into it, but it was there. Okay? It went off the air years and years ago, and I guess because of need or whatever, it just wasn't there. Well, a number of years ago, I was sitting home and I was watching TV, and I'm flipping the dial, and all of a sudden something caught my attention. And there's Mass for Shut-ins. And I'm thinking, well, this is pretty cool. This hadn't been on for years and years and years. And I'm watching it for a couple minutes, and then it dawned on me something really unusual was happening. The priest was saying Mass in Latin. And the Mass hadn't been said in Latin in years except special occasions. And now you're seeing some churches are bringing it back. But as a whole, it hadn't been probably 3-4 decades now. So now that's holding my attention. And then the next thing that happened kind of scared me. Because out of nowhere, I'm listening to the priest say Mass in Latin. And then all of a sudden, I'm reciting it along with him. Just word for word. And I'm thinking, where is this coming from?
Donus vobiscum.
Echo Spiritu tuo. It's in there, okay? It's one of those things that, it might be kind of a weird comparison, but I look at it, if I can remember the Mass in Latin after 40 years, I haven't had a drink in a long time either, but my brain still knows how to do that too. It's still in there. It's this unconscious thought. Every so often, the unconscious thought will show itself in the form of what we call a drunk dream, or a using dream, or a poison dream. And this is where the brain is kind of downloading information. And if you've never had one, hang on to something because you will. I'll never forget my first couple of months in recovery. I'd go to meetings and I'd hear people talk about having, I had such a dream last night. And I was one of those naive people, and of course, being sober for a couple of months, I knew everything. And I would kind of to myself would criticize, geez, how hard are you working your program? You shouldn't be having dreams. What's wrong with you? Until I had my first one. And it scared the hell out of me. I woke up the next morning and I had the shakes and the sweats and everything was just like I had picked up again. That's kind of that unconscious thought leaking through a little bit. Okay? The second stage of the process is what I like to refer to as a conscious thought. And now in a conscious thought, what's happening? Here the person is kind of thinking about it. They're not using, but they're kind of entertaining it or flirting with it. This stage goes by a lot of other names. We talk about euphoric recall or romancing the drug, that type of thing. Here we start to say, well, I'm certainly not going to do it, but we're thinking about, maybe one day. Okay? For the people that I work with that aren't in recovery, again, when I do this in workshops and that type of thing, I use another example. And this might be one that certainly all of you can relate to as well. I ask them, I want you to think back to your favorite food, something you would absolutely kill for. And now all of a sudden you find out you can't eat it anymore. In my case, some of you know my second addiction is cheese. I can eat cheese until it's coming out of my ears. Well, I had a doctor's appointment yesterday for a physical. And suppose during this appointment, he told me, everything looks good, but one of the tests we ran, we found out you have got such an allergy to cheese that if you ever eat it again, you're going to die. Well, I'm certainly going to walk out of that office going, well, I love my cheese, but I don't want to die. Okay? I can guarantee you, a month or two from now, I'm going to start playing that game of, did he mean all cheese? Did he mean the cheese I don't like? Does he mean just eat a piece, not the whole pound? I'm going to come up with a way to kind of figure out a way around it. So here I'm kind of playing with that idea. A lot of times in non-recovery situations or people that aren't in recovery don't have an understanding. We talk about relapse and a desire and where that comes from. People sometimes struggle with how could somebody take something that almost killed us and ever use it again. They just don't get that concept. Well, here's that thing where that mind game is being played. If you're allergic to strawberries, I can guarantee that sometime in your life, you're going to walk down the aisle at the grocery store, and strawberries are going to be the best they've ever been. They're going to be the biggest they've ever been, cheaper than they've ever been. You can't tell me that person's not going to think, wow, I bet one wouldn't hurt. Or who's going to know? Okay, that kind of. So, pardon me, there's this conscious thought. Give you an example from a recovery standpoint where this is kind of an unusual situation. I had a guy a number of years ago in group, and we were talking about this very thing. And after group, he came up to me, and he said, that was pretty interesting stuff, but he said, I'll tell you what. He said, you know my story. I'm not going to need any of this. And I remember his name was Ed. I remember telling him, Ed, you better be careful because that's one step closer to really needing this stuff. And he said, no. He said, you know my story. He was a cocaine addict, and he said, you know my story. He said, lost my business, almost lost my family, my health is in the tank. You couldn't pay me to ever use again. And I said, Ed, you better be real careful because he said, look, I'm going to tell you one more time. And he was getting a little defensive about it. He said, I will never, ever pick up again. And then the next thing he said scared me to death more than it did him. He looked me right in the eye and said, but you know what? If I ever do, this is what I'm going to tell my wife. I said, Ed, 2 seconds ago you ain't never going to do it. Now you got a disaster plan. Now there's a contingency plan. He's flirting with that thought. Never going to happen, but if it does. We have to be real careful with this piece. Okay? The next part, if we're not careful, turns into a conscious action. And this is where the person uses. For years, this was the misconception. People would look at this as relapse. In fact, for a number of years, and you still hear it occasionally now, people will refer to their use in the present tense. Somebody will get honest and say, I got to tell everybody, I relapsed last night, or I relapsed over the weekend. They didn't relapse last night, they used. Relapse is all the stuff that precedes it that sets the need to use in motion. And it's not an event, it's a process. So when we talk about relapse, we're talking about these two things, not this. And please don't hear it the way that might sound. If somebody uses again, we certainly want to get them back into treatment, back to meetings, back on medication, back to church, whatever it was they were doing to maintain their sobriety. But that's not prevention. That's damage control. It's important, but that's not preventing anything. That action to me is like the old saying that most people are familiar with. It's like closing the barn door after the horse has gotten out. Okay? You certainly want to go get your horse back. But if you bring him or her back, put them back in the stall, and don't fix the problem that let them get out in the first place, you're going to be chasing them again and chasing them again. Okay? We certainly want to do the damage control, but that's not fixing the problem. Relapse prevention is about recognition of these things here. Okay? Some of you know I kind of melt this all down into a very simple mathematical formula. Relapse prevention for me is all about making sure this plus that never equals this. Okay? Not to scare anybody, but all of us in recovery, anybody that addiction is an issue for, we have this. It's in there. We've got the 1 out of 3. This is going to float in every once in a while. Not to step on anybody's recovering toes, but I hate it when I hear people, especially old-timers who are talking to new people coming into treatment and meetings and recovery, when he or she, somebody new will say, I'm struggling a little bit, and I'm thinking about it, and I thought, when does the urge go away? And oh my God. And there's always some old-timer in the group that will look at that individual and say, I've been sober since the dawn of time, and not once have I thought about taking a drink. And all of a sudden, that new person struggling, who feels this big, now feels this big, and wonders what they're doing wrong. In actuality, they're doing nothing wrong. When you ask somebody, and I've had this happen before, when I hear somebody say, not once have I ever thought about, and I say, you can't tell me once in 25 years, once in 10, once in 50 years, you've never, nope, the compulsion to use has been removed. And I tell them, I accept that. As of today, as of right now, the compulsion to drink in my life has been removed. If you look at addiction as a mental health piece also, addiction very often has been looked at as an obsessive-compulsive disorder. The obsession is the thinking about, the compulsion is the acting on that thought. So when somebody says the compulsion to drink or use has been removed, I don't doubt that. But that doesn't mean that that thought doesn't float in once in a while. What changes over time is my ability to deal with it. That thought floats in. I've been sober a long time, and that thought floats in and out. Some of you know part of my story. The first time, and every year, I know the thought is going to float in. The first time in the spring when I cut the grass, and there's that smell of fresh cut grass, a warm breeze blowing, and that one rogue brain cell fires up and says, cold beer sure would taste nice. Fortunately, the other part of my brain, the rational part, kicks in and says, when did you learn the meaning of one? And then it says, if you're that thirsty, get a drink out of the hose. That'll take care. But that thought is there. Now, if somebody hears that I thought about taking a drink, or thought about a drink the first time I cut the grass this year, that I'm in real trouble, then God love you. We're all entitled to our opinions. I don't look at it as that. What happens is, what do you do? How do you handle that situation? That's the difference. That's when the compulsion to use has been taken away. That's where it's evident. But that doesn't mean the person doesn't ever think about it. The person, again, going back to the example, if you're allergic to strawberries, somewhere in the rest of that person's life, at least once, they're going to think about it and how good they used to taste. And that's euphoric recall. It's part of the process. We all do it. Okay? So we have to be real careful with, again, making sure that the unconscious thought plus the conscious thought never turns into this. Okay? I can't prove this, but I have kind of a theory that how this whole thing kind of plays itself out. A lot of you are familiar with, we talk about triggers or traps. If you've ever done any work with Terry Gorski, he refers to them as stuck points. Sometimes we refer to them as high-risk areas. If you go to meetings, AA, NA, CDA, any meeting like that, we refer to them as slippery people, places, and things. If we look at triggers and how, if they're not dealt with, they can certainly lead the individual back to active use. Again, not based on any clinical data or any clinical situation, just years and years of observation. I have this theory that when we talk about triggers, triggers are formed in here, kind of between that unconscious and conscious thought. Triggers are acted on in here. So what we need to do is always make sure we have some way of kind of turning the volume down on the triggers. I've had people, all the time will say, when does the urge go away? It never does. Again, it floats in and out. I heard one of the most profound things I ever heard at a meeting years ago. Guy was celebrating his 25th anniversary, and he goes and picks up his chip. And there were a lot of new people that night. A lot of people had picked up their 24-hour chip and 30-day chips and that kind of thing. And he got up when he got his chip. He said, I'm going to tell you a piece of information that is so important to me, and I hope it's important to everybody else. And the quicker you learn this, the easier it's going to be. He said, I had to find out things don't change, we do. And he went and sat down. Okay? It's a lot of information in that little statement. Okay? Things don't change. We do. We have the ability to find other ways to turn the volume down on these triggers now. So when we talk about triggers are formed in here and triggers are acted on in here, prevention is all about recognition. Yeah, Phil?
John, it is an obsessive compulsive disorder. And, that obsession, you're right, never leaves us. What we did when we were actively using was that was the compulsion. That's what we did. Today, what we can do is something positive instead.
Absolutely.
Go to a meeting, call somebody.
Absolutely.
The last time that I thought I could, the thought popped into my head that I could safely drink again, I laughed at myself and called myself a 7-letter dirty word. It starts with A and has HOL in it. But that's what changes, is the way, what we do about it. Alcohol still, kind of, has a big part in my life. It's what I do about it. Yeah.
And I think that's an excellent point, because that's exactly what you see is so many of us, we get sober, are absolutely astounded that the liquor stores are still in business. The dealers are still there. You can still buy lotto tickets or racing forms. That stuff doesn't change. What changes is our ability to deal with it. So again, this stuff's going to be there. What we have to deal with is this. Some of you know one of my pet peeves in recovery. To give you an example, is the word slip. We use it, it's a slang term, it's a common term, it's another 4-letter word that we use in like kiss and halt and all those, so we can fear, so we can remember things that are important. If you look at slip means an accident. If we finish up here in a little bit and everybody's headed out to their car, suppose you step in a mud puddle and you slip and fall on your rear end. That's an accident. That's a slip. I don't think, maybe I'm going out on a limb with this, I don't think anybody's sitting in here right this minute thinking, okay, when this is over, I'm going to walk out here, I'm going to find a mud puddle that I can slip in and fall on my rear end. And, it's an accident. If you're thinking about that, stick around because we got work to do. We'll talk. A slip, again, is an accident. When we talk about relapse, relapse is a subconscious setup. It's a subconscious sabotage that turns into this situation. A guy I was in treatment with, I'll give you a little story. There was a guy I was in treatment with years and years ago. His name was Carl. And the program I was involved with was an outpatient program. At the time, it was met 5 nights a week for 5 weeks, and very intensive up front. Well, the counselor that I had, God love her name, was Roz Goldfarb, and Roz is still a dear friend. She helped save my life. And Roz always started off group by asking people, no matter what we had to do, is there anything we need to talk about? And if somebody was having a problem or struggling, we would just put medical aspects on the back burner or whatever and talk about that incident. Well, Carl was kind of one of the older members in the group. He'd been there for a couple of weeks. And he said, I have a question for a couple people. He said, this weekend I'm going out of town, going to a wedding, and I'm really uncomfortable. It's the first drinking event that I'm going to be involved with, and I'm really not comfortable. Well, a couple people had some great ideas. Don't go. Because, well, I have to. It's my favorite nephew, and I want to go. Somebody said, well, go to the service and leave and come home. Don't go to the reception. Well, no, it's in Philadelphia, and I really don't want to go up for 15 minutes and turn around. I have to go. And somebody said, do you have a sponsor? Well, yeah. Ask him to go with you. Well, no, I can't do that because nobody knows I'm in recovery, and how am I going to explain this friend with me that's, he said, I know there's got to be a better way. Well, people came up with a couple of other ways, and finally he said, no, I said, I appreciate your input, but you know what? I'm going to be okay. This should have been a tip-off for all of us. I forgot I'm taking Antabuse. I'll be okay. Friday night comes, last group we're doing before he leaves. He's leaving for Philadelphia that night after group. Carl, are you okay? Yep, I'm fine. I'm good to go. Well, we'll be thinking about you. You're in our prayers. We'll see you. Off he goes. Monday comes, no Carl. Well, you don't want to think this way, but you can't help it. Right away, that little voice in the back of all our heads was saying, uh-oh, we know what happened. But nobody wanted to say anything. Tuesday night, no Carl. I thought, well, maybe he hadn't seen the family in a while, so he's stayed a couple extra days, and he's fine. Tuesday, like I said, no Carl. Wednesday, no Carl. Next Monday, in comes Carl. And he comes in like nothing, walks in, sits down, looks around. How's everybody doing? How was your weekend? And we're thinking, which weekend? This one or last weekend? You haven't been here in a while. And he's just sitting there. And everybody wanted to ask the question. But none of us wanted to be the bad guy. Pardon me. Roz comes in the room and she goes, oh, Carl, good evening. How are we? I'm fine. Thanks, ma'am. I appreciate you asking. And she's just standing there watching. And anybody have anything we need to talk about? No, we're good. No, we're fine. You sure nobody has anything we need to talk about? Oh, no, ma'am. What do we got going tonight? What are we doing? She said, well, I tell you what, since everybody's being way too polite, I have something to ask. And we're all thinking, oh, my God, here it goes. And she looks over at Carl and said, Carl, I'm sure everybody in here would love to know what's it like to drink on Antabuse. And I wouldn't know. And she said, Carl, come on. What's it like to drink on? I don't know. Well, now a couple of us say, hey, come on, man. This is us you're talking to now. What's it like? He said, I don't know. Well, you were gone for a whole week. He said, I'll be honest with you. He said, you called me on it. He said, yes, I did drink. Well, what's it like to drink on Antabuse? I don't have a clue. I stopped taking it a week ago just in case I drank. That ain't a slip. That's a setup. He put himself in that situation. This wasn't an accident. This it was a subconscious setup. I learned a long time ago, we talk about all the acronyms and everything in recovery, like KISS and HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You can use the word SLIP to refer to relapse also, if you want to use it in terms of SLIP stands for sobriety loses its priority, or sobriety lost its priority. I'm a firm believer in the old saying that sobriety's not first, nothing's second. If somebody picks up again, it's not an accident. It may seem to come out of nowhere. It may seem to hit from nowhere. But in all honesty, once we get sober again and we look back and can dissect it, we can see it coming. A day before, a week before, a month before, sometimes even more than that. So again, triggers are formed here, they're acted on here. One thing that I want to do a little quick look at, and like I said, we'll probably do this in two segments. I hear all the time, and I know you may have said it, or you may say it, I certainly did, and every so often I'll have my days, okay? I need one more thing to go wrong. You'll hear people say that all the time. I need one more thing to go wrong and that's it. If this is sobriety, you can have it. Very often we suffer, especially early in the process, and early is a relative term, and we'll find ourselves in the mindset of, my life was a mess when I was drinking or using or gambling or whatever. I've stopped. My life is still a mess. What did I stop for? We make that connection. If everybody's saying that all the problems in my life are revolve around my drinking, and if you want them to change, you better stop there. And we do, and nothing changes. You know, it doesn't take long for that person to make that connection. Then obviously this wasn't the problem. My life was a mess when I was using. It's a mess now. Why did I quit? Again, if this is sobriety, you can have it. Very often people will say, again, I need one more thing to go wrong, and I'm out of here. Please, and I don't mean this to sound facetious, if your relapse prevention plan revolves around one more thing in your life never going wrong, you better grab onto something, because life is full of one more things. We've found over the years, myself personally in my own recovery, and just years and years of experience with folks, very often that one more thing is not some huge catastrophic event. It's something usually as simple as somebody cut you off in traffic. Or I said we were going to end early today and we go 10 minutes over, that's all I needed. Then it's my fault. It's never a huge situation. Over the years, we've learned it's not that one more thing. Usually it's all the things that came prior to that. Yeah, no.
You talk often about an addiction being cunning, baffling, and powerful. And this might sound like a stupid question or at least asking for a stupid answer, but how do you know if you're having conscious thoughts? If it's all sneaky and you don't know, well, was that a bad thought? Or...
Usually by the time you're having those thoughts, you're aware those thoughts are there. That cunning part is where it starts to whisper to you. In fact, in AA and NA, that's what they refer to as stinking thinking. Is when we start to try to convince ourselves that maybe I can handle this now. That's the cunning part. The unfortunate part of that is if a person goes back out. I was talking to somebody this morning about this. It's how he found himself in this situation, and he'll be coming into group here next week. He found himself saying, you know what? He hadn't had a drink in a couple of months. I bet I can handle this now. And he had one, and nothing happened. And the next night, he had one. And then the next night, he had 20 and got 2 DWIs within 24 hours of each other. Okay? There's that sucker punch of, it's okay, and then the bottom drops out. So much of relapse prevention is about starting to recognize that setup, that conscious thought is starting to whisper, saying, maybe not today, but soon, I can handle this. And I think you're right, that is the cunning part. Very often we talk about, and you can split it out as a fourth thing, or you can look at it as part of the whole cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's also patient. It's going to lay there and wait. Bill Wilson, one of the co-founders of AA, used to always talk about being on guard for the unguarded moment. When you least expect it, that's when it's going to jump up and bite us. At least with this, if we're aware these things can be a problem. We've talked before, it's not a very clinical tool, but one of I think one of the best relapse prevention tools we have is learning to trust our own gut reaction. And if something doesn't feel right, it's not right. And we need to kind of err on the side of caution. Yes, sir. Yeah, Phil.
Another way of looking at shift is stop living in the present. And basically what that means is, we have to deal with today's problems with today's solutions. And when we start thinking that we can deal with today's problems by using again, by drinking again, that's when that's the conscious thought.
Yeah.
That's the conscious thought.
Yeah, and I think that's how, again, a lot of us get sucker punched into what used to work. You've heard me mention before this concept that I like to call thinking and sober. And basically, in active use, the way most people thought, how the thought process worked, was we would act first and then deal with the consequences. In recovery, what we learn to do is add a piece to that. We think first and then act based on what the consequences are going to be. That takes time to learn how to do that because it's kind of foreign, it's kind of backwards to how, for so many, some of you know, we've got a friend of the group that used to always talk about his concept when he was drinking was ready, fire, aim. And we have to learn how to do ready, aim, fire. And I think that really is something a lot of us struggle with early on. So again, it's about recognition. And again, I'm a firm believer, awareness is the key to prevention. The more I know about something that could be dangerous, what are the slippery slopes in my life? What are those slippery people, places, and things? The more I know about those things, the better chance I have of dealing with them. I have a great example that I like to use, and again, for the sake of time, I can't do it in the 10 minutes or so that we have left. So we're going to do this in two segments. We're going to end this piece here, and we'll end a little early. Again, I wanted to thank everybody for being here. We will do the second piece. I'll let you know when we're going to do that, and probably do a couple of run-throughs with this as well. Years ago, anytime I go out of town and do lectures and presentations, I always end this way. And I don't know why I don't do it in here more often, because it's important to me. Years ago, Bill Wilson, again, one of the co-founders of AA, used to always end meetings by telling everybody, thanks for being here and thanks for helping me stay sober one more day. And I heard that years ago, and I liked that, and I kind of borrowed that from him. So I want to pass that sentiment on to everybody. Thank you for being here today, and thanks for helping me stay sober one more day. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you real soon. Thanks. And that's something we've talked about before. When people say that one more thing, very rarely is it something catastrophic. It's something small. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. Well, that's it.
Yeah,
it's always, it's always some little teeny thing, and it's nothing dramatic. And like Phil said, at that point we're really just looking for something to. There's a movie that I used to use years and years ago. It was called I'll Quit Tomorrow, and there's a scene in there where it's a 3-part movie, and you kind of get the idea. Show you how old it was. It was on reel to reel. That's when I was in treatment, and it was part 1 was kind of signs and symptoms. You watched a day in the life of this guy. Part 2 was all about them doing an intervention with him, and it fallen flat because they give him an out. It's one of those. Well, if I ever do drink again, then I'll do all this stuff. Well, because there's part 3 that something must have happened. So part 3 focuses on a lot of relapse stuff. And one of the things that's a great scene in there, and you can tell what's getting ready to happen. Every night, you see him at work, and then they'll flash to a scene of him walking down the street to go to his car. And there's the bar he used to stop in, and he stops and just kind of lovingly looks in the window. And of course everybody's laughing and he's miserable, and he walks onto the car. Well, finally, one morning, he's getting ready to go to work. And his wife is fixing something for her for breakfast, and there's orange juice on the counter and a cup of coffee. And he throws that back, real quick, and he's heading out the door. And she asks him a question. Dinner at 6? She just wants to know, you're going to be home on time for dinner. Very, naive question. He turns around and blows up and says, yeah, I'll be home at 6. And how about this time it's served on time without the whining and the bitching and the complaining and on the... And then he storms out the door, and she's like deer in the headlights, just shell-shocked. Well, we call that argumentativeness, because what he's doing is he's setting the tone for, this might be the day that I don't get to walk past that bar and make it past it. If I drink tonight, it's your fault. Look what you did to me. You ruined my day. So at that point, we're just looking for one more thing. And we set that thing in motion. So what I want to do, we can go ahead and start now. Part 2 focuses on, I need one more thing to go wrong. If you've been with me before, you certainly know my artwork. But I want you to use your imagination. Okay? And I've had don't use your imagination that much. Okay. Okay. I got to come up with another way to draw this. But anyway, I'm a firm believer that you get so much information out of cartoons. You know, cartoons I think are done on 2 levels. There's the funny kids, ha-ha level. And then there's kind of that kind of overtone that adults look at it in a lot of different way. And it doesn't have to be an adult cartoon, an older cartoon with a mouth. It could be just, a Porky Pig cartoon. But so many cartoons have a lot of life lessons in them. When it comes to sobriety, there's a lot of messages in cartoons. To give you an example, and we're going to look at my favorite cartoons are Roadrunner cartoons. I absolutely love them. There are no bad ones. The ones that they make today aren't quite as good as the old ones, but they're good. We'll come back to that in a minute. One of my favorite cartoons that teaches a kind of a sobriety lesson, watch The Simpsons. And The Simpsons are loaded with little innuendos about drinking and recovery, and I'm sure there's a couple of us that are on the staff there that are involved with this. One of my favorite episodes is one where Barney, who's kind of the town drunk in the cartoon, walks out of a building and he looks great. If you've ever seen the cartoon, he looks really bad all the time, even on a good day. Well, he walks out of this bed, he looks like $1 million, just as happy and clean and spiffy as he can be. And he walks out of the door, and the camera kind of pulls back, and you see above the door, you see a sign that says detox on it. Well, he walks about 2 feet next door, walks into Moe's, that's the tavern, and Moe's gotten really smart. He's put up a sign over the tavern that says retox on it. So it's one of those nice little segues. Well, inside you hear something even better. Barney goes in and he's kind of negotiating for a drink. And he doesn't have any money, and Moe's tired of giving him credit. So they're kind of back and forth and back and forth. So finally it's, do you have anything for collateral? Well, Barney reaches in his pocket and hands Moe something, and Moe looks at it and goes, never seen a 10-minute chip before. So, again, there's some of us in the, there's one episode where Homer gets a DWI. And he has to go to class, and they're talking about Larry the Liver and all this kind of stuff. But again, my favorite cartoons are Roadrunner cartoons. And just to give you a little backstory on this, I've used this example for years and years and years. And one day I realized maybe not everybody's seen a Roadrunner cartoon, and I started explaining. If you've never seen, the premise is, well, a number of years ago, I was out of town at a treatment center doing a presentation with this topic, and I realized in the front row there were 9 Russian doctors and a translator sitting next to the last one in the line. And I've always wondered, you kind of look at that, the old party game, a telephone, where you tell a story over here and it comes around and what you hear over. I always wondered what that last guy was hearing as it went through 9 filters, from what I was saying. Well, anyway, I realized when I just assumed that everybody had seen these cartoons, and I realized that, well, you've got these 9 Russian doctors that probably never seen one. So I said, if you've never seen a Roadrunner cartoon, let me set the premise of how it works. Well, this one little Soviet doctor looked up at me and smiled and just went poof. And I thought, it's the international, I couldn't speak a lick of English, but he knew the poof at the end. Well, if you've never seen a Roadrunner cartoon, the highlights of the cartoon is when something goes off the cliff, and it's usually Wile E. Coyote. When he hits the canyon floor, there's that big puff of smoke and that kind of thing. Well, in all the cartoons, all the episodes, Wile E. Coyote is spending the entire episode chasing Roadrunner, and he never catches him. You know, all the Acme Seed and Atomic this and Super that, he never catches him. In one episode, in fact, I had somebody a number of years ago make a comment about it. It sounded to me like Wiley needed to go to a meeting. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you know, that second step stuff about expecting different results from the same behavior. He's been chasing him for 50 years and never caught him. But in the next episode, he's going to try it again. Well, there was one episode, and I kind of locked in on this, and people might think I'm reading too much into this, but I don't think you'll think so when you see it through here. There was one episode that they decided the turnabout was fair play. So what they did in this episode was Roadrunner's chasing Wile E. Coyote through the whole episode. And of course, none of the Acme stuff is working for him either. Here's the end of the episode, the last couple of minutes of the cartoon. They're running across the desert, and then all of a sudden they come to that ever-present ledge, okay, that little overhang of land. Use your imagination. That's Wile E. Coyote. Okay? Now, he stops just in the nick of time. This is an addict's dream come true, because when he stops, he kicks off about 1 million little pebbles off the ledge, and of course the camera follows all of them down, and you get a whole lot of little puffs of smoke. Now, Roadrunner is a whole lot smarter than he is. I always tell people, this is where you're going to learn a little bit of cartoon animation history that you probably never knew. Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner are related to each other. In fact, they look damn near the same. So use your imagination. Roadrunner's smarter. Again, he stops. He's not going out on the ledge. Well, for the time being, everything seems to be safe. Wiley's out here. Roadrunner's out there. They're kind of at a standstill, but everything's okay. There's no threat. Now you got to be realistic. A little cartoon crack in the ledge. Okay. So now an eternity seems to pass. Nobody's doing anything. Then all of a sudden, Roadrunner gets bored and he starts looking around. Cartoon light bulb goes off over his head. He's come up with a solution. What he sees is a lot of little rocks laying around. Okay. So he picks one up and he throws it at Wiley. Well, Wile E. Coyote's first reaction is he ducks. And when he ducks, he almost falls off the ledge. So that's not a good idea. Well, Roadrunner sees that. Throws another one at him. And he ducks the other way. He almost falls off the ledge. Well, this happens a couple more times. Finally, the light bulb goes off over Wile E. Coyote's head. Roadrunner throws the next one, and he catches it. And nothing happens. Well, this exchange goes back and forth, on and on and on. Till finally what you see is something that looks like this. Okay. Of course, the crack goes through a little bit more. Okay. But nothing happens. Behind the pile of rocks, you see these exclamation points go up, kind of like, whew, I'm okay, it's relief. And then all of a sudden, off in the distance, okay, and you know where this is going. You see this little moth start hovering around. Well, apparently Wile E. Coyote sees it too, because now all of a sudden those little exclamation points get huge. He's in a panic. Well, you know, the inevitable happens. The moth lands on the pile of rocks. The crack goes all the way through, and down they go. And you get one tremendous puff at the bottom of the canyon. Okay? I've had people literally, in group or doing it as a presentation in the public, I've had people yell out, "That damn moth." If it wasn't for that moth, it's not the moth. When somebody says, "I need one more thing to go wrong," it's not the one more thing. That might be the final straw or that kind of thing. It's not the one more thing. It's all the stuff he's hanging on to that gave that moth that kind of power. Let me ask you a question, and I get a lot of different answers when I do this, but you're smarter than the general public, so I know you've figured this out. What would have been a better solution? And before anybody says, "Well, he shouldn't have been out on the ledge in the first place," okay? This isn't the perfect world. We got what we got. He's out there, okay? What would have been a better solution for Wiley to handle this?
Throw them over the side.
Catch the rocks and throw them over. I've had people have a good idea, but there's one flaw in it. I've had people say, "Well, catch the rocks and throw them back." Well, the problem with that is unless you're a really good aim and you knock him out with the first one, you just gave another rock for him to throw back at you. So basically, the way to handle this is you catch what's thrown, look at it, and dump it. If he had done that, and that moth had been flying around and landed on his head, it might have been an inconvenience. Just brush it away. He might not even have noticed it. It certainly wouldn't have ended in this disaster. It's not the one more thing. It's what the person is holding on to. Now this is where you have to, for some people, might have to use your imagination a little bit, because some people might think this is a stretch. I see the serenity prayer in this cartoon, okay? If you take a look at the 3 lines of the serenity prayer that most people are familiar with, and if you ever have an opportunity to read the entire serenity prayer, please do. It's a gorgeous prayer. It really, it sums up a lot of the principles in recovery. But even people who aren't in recovery or know anything about recovery, a lot of people have seen the serenity prayer somewhere along the way. It's on refrigerator magnets and posters and that kind of thing. The 3 lines that we focus on the most in recovery, the first 3, is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the 3rd line is the rub for most people. That's the wisdom to know the difference. So often people will look at that first line and say, "Accept what I can't change." Well, I can change anything. Bring it on. Or they go the other direction and say, "You know what? I can't handle a thing," and just do nothing. It's finding that balance. That's the hard. To me, that's Wile E. Coyote catching the rock and looking at it and deciding, can I do something with it or do I need to get rid of it? As a visual example, let me use myself as an example with this. I was doing this lecture again a number of years ago out of town, and I came up with a way to kind of show this in another way. And please, by no stretch of the imagination, did I only have 4 things in my life to change. I just happened to have 4 markers in my hand when I was doing this, so I used 4 examples. Now, we were talking not too long ago about one of the biggest problems in relapse that people will run into is the fact that, we talk about the difference between quantity of sobriety versus quality. And quantity is a wonderful thing. Now, don't get me wrong, marking off days on the calendar and weeks and months and years, and that's a wonderful thing. But quality is what we should be looking for. I've mentioned so many times that quantity does not necessarily breed quality. Everybody in here, and I hope you're never one of those people, you hang around sobriety long enough, you're going to run into the man or woman who's been sober forever, and they're the most miserable SOB you ever met in your life. You'll also run into somebody who's been sober for 30 days, and they just glow. And they'll tell you, I don't know what it is, but I like it, and I want to hold on to it. Quantity does not breed quality. Quality will always breed quantity. If you like what you're doing, you're going to want more of it. If you don't, you're not. So it's a very simple formula. Suppose I'm early in my recovery, and I wake up one day, and I'm having one of those days where one of my favorite old Father Martin philosophies or quotes was when he used to say, "Where's all this serenity that everybody's yakking about?" Well, we all run into those times where it's like, boy, if this is it, you can have it. Again, I need one more thing to go wrong. Suppose I'm early in the process and I'm having one of those little stretches, and I'm thinking I'm doing everything I can possibly do, and I'm miserable. Okay? So I do what I'm supposed to. I ask my sponsor or I ask somebody, and maybe they say to me, "Have you cleaned house?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've made my amends. I've done it." "Have you really cleaned house?" And I said, What are you talking about?" "Yes, I have." "Look at the things that are weighing you down. What do you think is not changing that's making you not enjoy your recovery?" So I say, "Okay, I'll do that. I'll go home and I think about it." Well, suppose today's the day and I wake up this morning at no time like the present, and I made a list and I've got 4 things that are just absolutely dragging me down. That if this is sobriety, you can have it. Again, a lot of people we had mentioned in the previous little segment, very often what you'll see is a person will start to tell themselves, "When I was drinking or using, my life was a mess. Now I've stopped, it's still a mess." And it doesn't take much for the person to say, "Well, obviously the drinking or the drug use or the gambling wasn't the problem because I've stopped it and things haven't changed." So we find ourselves in this. So again, suppose that's where I am. So I go and I make this list and I come up with 4 things. I say, okay, here we go. When I was drinking, I lost 4 jobs in 6 months. That's pretty serious stuff. I need to take a look at that. When I was drinking, I spent money like I had it. That's pretty serious stuff. When I was drinking, I wrecked a lot of cars. That's pretty serious stuff. When I was drinking, I emotionally abused my wife, my daughters, my parents, the neighbors, co-workers, people I knew, people I didn't know. If you were in my life, somehow you shared the wrath. Okay? That's pretty serious stuff. I need to take a look at that. So now I say, okay, I did what I was supposed to do. I looked at those 4 things that are dragging me down. I looked at it, I've identified them, and I still have them. That didn't work. Well, maybe I didn't do it right. I'm new at this. Let me try it again. So kind of go through the yada, yada, yada. Now I've done it twice, and I still have them. And not only when you look at stuff in the past and deal with this, not only does it take physical time, it also can be emotionally draining. So now I've taken a look at this junk. It wore me out. It hasn't changed. I did it again. Now I'm twice as tired, and I still have it. So I tell myself, well, what the hell, might as well keep going. Do it again and again. Suppose I do that all day long, and I've looked at that stuff and examined it 30, 40 times, and I am absolutely exhausted. Remember HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. The tired we talk about isn't, I've had a busy day and I'm tired. We're talking about exhaustion, just mentally and physically wiped out. Well, I'm wiped out, and I'm looking going, I still have this stuff. If this is sobriety, maybe it's never going to change for me. And I'm lucky, and somebody leans over my shoulder. Either my sponsor calls me, or it's divine intervention or something. And somebody says, look at it one more time, and look at it for real. What do you mean? Look at it for real. Okay, well, what do I got to lose? And in that instant, there's kind of that little insight that says, now I know what they're talking about. Look at it for real. When I was drinking, I lost 4 jobs in 6 months. I can't unlose a job. Those are gone. I know why it happened, and I'm not doing that anymore. Maybe I can let that go. When I was drinking, I spent money like I had it. You can't unspend money. You can't undo that. I know why that happened. I'm not doing it anymore. And again, I can't change the past. Let it go. When I was drinking, I wrecked a lot of cars. You can't unwreck a car. I know why it happened. I'm not doing that anymore. Maybe I can just put that on the shelf. When I was drinking, I emotionally abused everybody in my life. That's pretty serious stuff. I need to take a look at that. I can't just brush that off like it didn't. I can't change the fact that it happened, but I can work on making amends. making sure it doesn't happen again. So I can do something with this. They did a study years and years ago, had nothing to do with addiction, and it was done by somebody like the Rand Corporation or somebody in one of those think tank groups. And they found out that most people, just mere mortals, okay, will spend 80 to 90% of their effort trying to fix or change the 80 or 90% of the stuff in our lives that we've got no control over. A lot of wasted effort. Well, look at the stuff that I had. I got 100% of junk in my life that's making the quality of my sobriety not be what I want it to be. In one fell swoop, I just got rid of 75% of the junk. I can't undo that. I know why it happened, and I'm making sure it's not going to happen again. Also, if you look at it in reverse, if you spend 80 or 90% of your effort trying to fix the 80 or 90% of the stuff you can't change, it would be great if we could take the 80 or 90% of our effort, put it into the 10, 15, 20% of the things that we can do something about, or at least attempt to do something about. What a different life it would be. I just got rid of 75% of the effort, and now I can focus on dealing with this. It's not the one more thing. It's all the stuff that he's holding on to. It's all the stuff that we hang on to. If we can get rid of that, then we stand a pretty good chance of the quality of our sobriety improving. Okay? It takes time to be able to do that. And like I said, a lot of people get kind of wrapped around the axle when they look at the, what I can change, what I can't, and that type of thing. It's so much easier. And sometimes people in the past have said, well, that's just copping out. That's just saying, well, I can't fix them. I'm not saying we can't look at the past, we can't deal with the past, we just can't dwell in it. I can't change all that. To give you an example, one of my favorite examples, again, has nothing to do with addiction, but a lot of you have had this situation happen. I've used this example for years, and I finally had it happen in person in my own life a year ago. You watch all these shows like Law and Order and all the legal shows on TV, and I love the scenes, and maybe you've had first-hand experience as well. I love the scenes where somebody says something in the courtroom, and the judge immediately stops everything and turns to the jury and tells the jury to please disregard that remark. Okay? You can't unhear it. That's not what he or she means when they say that. What they mean is don't let it influence your judgment. They're not expecting everybody to say, well, we need a recess and a timeout so I can go pull this thing out of here. It means don't let it influence your judgment. Back in April last year, I had jury duty, and I got called to sit on a jury. And I'm sitting there thinking the whole time I'm listening that, wow, wouldn't it be something if it, and by God, it happened. One of the attorneys said something that the judge didn't want allowed in, and he turned right to us and told, and I'm surprised I didn't get charged with contempt because I laughed. And I thought, but all I can think of is, don't, just pull that out of there. Don't unhear it. So again, what we have to do, like I said, is we look at the past, we deal with it, we don't dwell in it. It's not copping out when I say, I can't undo that. I've heard Phil a number of times talk about can't unring a bell. It's happened. As an example that I never, ever would do, okay? Suppose for some reason I just run over and I smack Chad. I just hit him. And then I'd catch myself and go, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know where that came from. I can apologize all I want. I can't unhit him. What I can do is make sure it doesn't happen. I can't undo a physical thing that occurred. I can't lose a job. I can't unspend money. What I can do is make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's one of the things when we look at this, I need one more thing to go wrong. It's not the one more thing. It's all the junk you're hanging on to. We can kind of clean house every so often. If you go to meetings, an AA, NA, CDA, and a 12-step program, one of the great ways we have of kind of dumping the dirt every so often, We all know you do a 4-step and you do an inventory and you take care of all that stuff that like Father Martin used to always talk about, all the things that make us less than lovable. You know, most people do a 4-step once a year. Maybe you might do it like spring or fall house cleaning, you know, do it a couple times a year. We have a great way to kind of maintain. In a 10-step, we do a daily inventory. And for years I've always referred to a 10-step as kind of an emotional oil change. It's that maintenance that we do. So when we come around to doing a 4-step again, we don't have all that junk. Some of you know the family just finished a little while ago cleaning out the garage. And what started out as we can do this in a day turned into a couple weekend project. And I'm fussing and fuming, and we got it done. And it took a lot of effort. And telling tales out of school, and we can edit this out. At the end, I said something about, God, I don't ever want to go through that again. And my wife looked at me and said, then don't let it get like that again. If you keep on top of it, you won't have to. It's like, okay, I got it. I understand. We do the same thing. It's not, I need one more thing. We clean out the garage every so often. Get rid of the junk that we're hanging on to. And then that one more thing won't have that kind of impact. Again, we have two options. The moth lands on us. Is it going to cause this catastrophe? Or is it just going to be an inconvenience and we deal with it? Some of you have told a little story real quick over the years that I'd have new people come into group, and I've done this for years and years and years, this example. And I'd have people come into group, and I'd ask them, you know, how was your day, how was your week? And people would come in and go, oh my God, I had a 2-moth week, you know, or a 1-moth day, or what. New people would look at them like, what have I gotten myself into? But I understood what they meant, you know. What am I hanging on to that's giving this little guy all the power? If I get rid of all this junk that I can't change, it's a good possibility I'm not even going to recognize that he's there. Or it certainly isn't going to be the disaster that this creates. It's all about staying on top of it, staying in the moment in that regard. So anyway, I wanted to finish this piece up, and I'm going to end with the same way I ended the last segment, and we can do whatever we need to do with that. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to thank everybody for helping me stay sober one more day. So again, keep up the good work, and we'll see you real soon. So thank you. But I think, again, this is one of those situations that, you know, a lot of us find ourselves in. You know, just that, Jim?
Because the addict, like me, responds pre-recovery, holding the rocks, just see the moth and go to Roadrunner, see what you made me do, and jump off it.
Yeah.
We've all done that, right?
Yeah.
Forget them all, I'm out of here.
Yeah, and I think that's the very thing. It's like, look at, again, go back to the example that I used with the guy in the movie. His wife asked that very innocent, innocuous question of dinner at 6. And he blows it up out of proportion. And all through that, he keeps making statements through that third segment. You got what you wanted. Now leave me alone. So this, like Jimmy said, this like turning to Roadrunner saying, see what you made me do. You know?
Let's go there. Dinner at 6. Now, I'll say anything. But dinner at 6 becomes the issue.
Right, even though it's not.
Even though it's a
It
non-issue.
shouldn't be. I mean, and for most of my life, you know, dinner at 6 is leftovers because we cook twice a week and then leftovers. So when I show up at 7, it just is this dire.
And one of the reasons
How many
why,
women are here? 2, 3.
let's play devil's advocate.
Witch that shows up.
Because I know where this is going, and we ain't going there today. We'll play devil's advocate for a minute.
Go ahead.
Look at how many times I'd come home and I would say, I'm going to do this or that. And then the family arranged around that schedule, and then I show up whenever I want to, or whenever for whatever reason.
Right.
After a while, it gets to a point where the family gets sucker punched so many times that it becomes the issue. It's not even, it's such a small issue But the issue that is driving the whole thing, the drinking, the using, the whatever it may be, gets pushed to the side because now it's, you lied again. I've heard Phil mention so many times that you were as addicted to lying as you were to alcohol. And a lot of us were like that. And after a while, the family just starts to say, okay, he says he's going to be home at 6. He's going to take us to the zoo. Here we go again. And then we get upset when they don't believe what we're saying. Or they make it an issue because I'll give you a prime example. And again, you can let this run if you want because she knows. I used to tell people all the time, if you had my wife, you'd drink too. She was an absolute nightmare to live with. And then all of a sudden, when I got sober, I started to realize I created that nightmare. Her reaction and response was a direct reaction to my drinking and the years of lying and the years of broken promises and all that kind of stuff. I created that. There was no doubt that it existed. But there were times she went way beyond what I thought should have been a point she was making or a question. But then I realized I put that in her. I did that so many times. As kind of a real corny example, I'm going to sound like I'm a really violent guy. Suppose, take Jimmy. Okay? Suppose I've done something. Yeah. So I use him as an example. Suppose I haven't seen you in a while because I've done something, I lied to you, got you in trouble at work, whatever. And I show up at your house to make amends. And I knock on the door, and you open the door, and I put my hand out, and I say, I'm sorry, my friend, let's start from scratch. And it's okay, I've been waiting for that, and we're good. And the next time I see you, I shake your hand. Then the next time I see you, I shake your hand. Then the next time you open the door, and you put your hand out, and I bust you one. You say, where the hell did that come from? Say, well, maybe he's having a bad day and that kind of. Well, the next time I see you, whether you want to or not, human reaction, when you open the door, you're going to kind of do this. And I'm going to put my hand and say, what's the matter with you? And shake your hand. Lull you into that false confidence, and then maybe after a couple more times of that, you open the door and you put your hand in and I knock you over again. It doesn't take long before every time you see me, you're going to duck. I've created that. I've done that. Doesn't make it right or wrong in terms of how a person reacts. I put that into motion. And I did that in my family so many times that I've mentioned before. When I told my family I was going into treatment, I got very upset because all they did was yawn. And I thought, well, there's a fine. Well, the reason why is I had told them 427 times before, I mean it this time. And then they'd come home and I'd be passed out on the floor. I set that into motion. Doesn't mean they're not responsible to some extent for their action and their reaction, but I'm just as responsible for putting that need into motion. And that's why we talk so often about families need to get into counseling. Families now have used as an example for years. And there's a car accident and there's a family involved. They don't just take the driver to the hospital. They take everybody, even if it's just to check them out. They don't just say, or the driver says, well, I'm really hurt, and somebody in the family says, he's hurt, he's busy, I'll go for him. He's got to take care of his situation, you got to take care of yours. That's why for years we've looked at addiction as the family disease. It doesn't just affect the individual who has it. It affects everybody around us. And very often, again, the behavior or the reaction that I would get from family and coworkers, I put that there. I'll give you another example that used to irritate me. 2 quick examples, and some of you I know have had this experience because and you will throughout the course of your sobriety. A number of years ago, I worked for a company. I was doing this work part-time and had another full-time job before I switched over to doing this. And I was sitting in my office, and there was one guy in the company that still remembered me when I drank. I'd been sober for a number of years, and he actually was my boss. And he came into the office one morning and asked me to do something. It was a report he needed by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, I was doing 900 other things. And I kind of just gave him the, yeah, okay, I'll take care of it. And it went in one ear and out the other because I'm focused on what I'm doing. About 2:30, he comes into the office. And I said, hey, how are you? And he goes, do you have it? I said, do I have what? He said, the report I asked you. I said, oh my God, is that what? I am so sorry. I remember you came in and I was busy and I forgot. Give me a half hour, I'll get it done and get it to you. And he said, okay. He said, no problem. He walks out and closes the door. And then he made a point to come back into the office. And he looked at me and he said, I'm glad you just forgot. He said, for a minute there, I thought we had lost you again. And I got livid. It's like, who do you think you are? And then it dawned on me, he didn't want that old tape playing, but that's exactly what happened, because that's how I worked in the past. Oh, I'll promise you anything, and then deny it 10 minutes later. The last time I had that happen was a number of years ago. I've been sober for probably 20 years. We were all together at my mom's for dinner, and I had 800 things on my mind. I would have rather have been anywhere but there. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I had other things I had to get done. We were late getting there. I was very standoffish at dinner. It was, we ate quick, come on, we gotta go. I got stuff, man on a mission kind of thing. We left early, and later that night, my sister called me. And she said, I don't want to upset you, and you didn't hear it from me. Well, she said, I understand what's going on. She said, I don't let Mom know. She said, after you left, Mom started to cry. And I said, what happened? She said, Mom said, oh my God, I think John's drinking again. And that hurt. And I started to feel, the anger. And then it dawned on me, why wouldn't she think that? Even after all those years. When I was drinking, was always late for family functions if I showed up. I was the nastiest SOB there. I didn't have any time for anybody. You were an inconvenience, leave me alone kind of thing. Basically, you're interfering with my drinking time, so let's get this done. Okay? And we always left early. Well, she didn't want that tape to play back again, but after all those years, there was that one little brain cell that fired up and said, oh my God, A plus B equals C. If he's doing this, then this must be what's going on. That wasn't what was happening at all. I was just having a crappy day. But I put that in. Use my mother again as a quick example. I don't know if Phil had something he wanted to add. I remember sitting at dinner one night when my grandmother was still alive. And my grandmother, God love her, got sober when she was 79. And this was right before she got sober. And we're sitting over a holiday dinner or something. And she and my mother started going back and forth, her mom. And she just looked at her, my mother did, and said, Mom, I swear to God, you just really push my buttons. And my grandmother smiled and said, Ann, I know how to push your buttons. I put them there. And I thought, wow, that was one of the most insightful things. She created that situation, and Mom was playing into it. When my family didn't trust me, it was from years and years of saying, yep, I'll do it, and then not following through. One of the most difficult things, and some of you have already had this experience, if you haven't, you will. Wait till the first time you actually are sick and you can't show up for work. Or you actually do run out of gas.
Right.
Or you actually are stuck in traffic. And you get the stink eye anyway because they know in the past this is what we did. It takes them a while to kind of defuse that. Sometimes they never will. I know a lot of examples, and you can cut all this stuff out, but we were at a patient of mine's first anniversary years and years ago. And I think I've been sober about 11 years. And we're still doing family work. And we had a woman in the group, her name was Dorothy. And she was about 72 or 3 years old. And her family had done an intervention, got her into treatment, and she was coming in. And I loved her family. They were just adorable. They really all worked well together. A lot of fun. And when it was coming up on her first anniversary, her daughter decided they wanted to do a little celebration. Her mom was going to a Sunday morning meeting, picking up her year chip, and then she wanted all of us in group, the whole family group, to come to their house for brunch. So we thought that'd be a really nice, and this was a tight-knit group. They really enjoyed being with each other. A lot like the folks in here. I mean, it's social too. And so we decided we'd go. Well, we're all sitting around, and we swore that during the course of eating, we weren't going to turn it into a meeting. That this was just going to be a congratulations, pass the bacon kind of thing. And well, of course, you get a bunch of drunks together. It doesn't matter. It turned into a meeting. And we're sitting there, and one of the wives of one of my new guys was sitting across the table from my wife and I. And her name was Sharon, and she looked across the table and asked Liz, she said, Don's been sober for a couple weeks, and she said, I feel really guilty. She said, I still don't trust him. And she looked at Liz, she said, can I ask you a personal question? And Liz said, sure. She said, how long did it take for you before you started to trust John again? And I'm kind of listening to this, and I'm getting all pumped up, and she said, I still don't. And it's like, what? I understood what she meant. There are times I come home, and I've had the day from hell, and my attitude isn't where it needs to be, or can you do this, and I forget, and that kind of, that little tape pops on for a second where it says, oh my God, and then she shuts it off going, well, he's probably just had a bad day. Or if the worst has happened, ain't nothing I can do about it. That's on him. But that tape is still there. And it takes a while for it to go away or to silence itself. It never really goes away. But anyway, Phil, you had a comment. I'm sorry.
Well, I used to think that my wife would have these extreme reactions to little things. I always, what the hell's that about, right? But you think about it, one of the oldest forms of water torture is the Chinese water torture, right? Not waterboarding as you know today. But they would strap, your head down and they just drip, one drip of water on your head, right? And at first, it's nothing. It's just a drip of water, right? It might be a little bit of an annoyance. But if you read about it over time, right, what happens is that next drip starts to feel like you're getting hit in the head with a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we did to them, It's not the, there's the big things, but there's all those little things.
It's the sum total, absolutely.
And it just builds up,
Yeah.
And, and their reactions become extreme to small things because it's just been a pattern for so damn long. Because, they want to trust us and we break their trust once again, They make plans and we screw it up once again. We say we're not going to come home drunk, and we come home drunk once again, and it just builds up over time to where, even the smallest thing is like being hit with a sledgehammer.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, it really is. It's the sum of the parts.
But
Taken individually, it's no big deal, but if it's again and again and again, it's a huge issue.
I'm going to ask the group, right? And I'm new to this and blah, blah, blah. And I've been up for 40 hours. So I told my wife, because we did this race thing, I said, can someone come pick me up in Solomon's and get me up to group? And it was this huge, plus it was 6 in the morning, I think, 5 in the morning. It became a huge issue. Why would I come get you and take you to group? It's like, well, why wouldn't you? If you want this from me, I'm down there without a car.
That's
right.
Why wouldn't you do this for me?
There's the thing.
Yeah.
She's having to do the work to take care of me. It still comes down to.
Yeah, but.
No, there's no yeah, but.
No, there's a yeah, but.
No.
What it comes down to is.
What am I supposed to do? Sail a boat down, bring a car down on top of it?
Or not do the sale.
Or not do the sale.
No, you had to
Or
pick.
take the day off. It's not her responsibility to get us.
right.
They weren't responsible to get us to the liquor store. We took care of that.
That's right.
They weren't responsible to get us home from work when we were too drunk. We took care of that. So it really comes down to it's not their responsibility. And anytime we're looking to say, you didn't do this for me, that's setting the next drink up saying, I tried to, and you didn't help. It's not their responsibility.
If you fail in recovery, it's nobody else's
It's
fault.
us.
It's,
It's us.
It's nobody.
I
It's
understand.
us. And you're right, we can be as pissed off as we want with everybody, it's still up to me. It's up to
So
me.
my
to do
daughter
it.
came and got me. Now I'm
Okay.
paying her $200 to go back down to give some guy this stuff, you know? But
That's okay.
even the other night, it's like, but if you want this, and I want this,
Yeah,
as a family, can't you help me? Can't you help me?
She
We
is.
talked about this last week,
she is.
family support, and, you
Oh,
know, I didn't
I
really
gotta tell you, Bob,
need
Yeah,
any
go ahead.
support when I was using. You know what I mean? Why am I so worried about it now?
Exactly.
Bob, they may want us to get sober, but at this point, they want to see some effort on our part.
That's right.
You know,
It's-
and frankly, you know, all this other stuff, you know, bailing you out, you know, of situations, coming to get you, all this kind of stuff, that's enabling.
It
Right?
is.
And at some point, they gotta stop doing that.
Yep.
it
And
has
when,
to-
and when they
we
can't
have to
do
take
it, then it
responsibility.
becomes, of course I drank, you didn't take
Yeah,
care of your
yeah,
part.
right. You recording, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Or good, because I agree. Bailing me out, get me out, whatever, blah. But this has been a prearranged, long-distance race, and all I wanted was some help to get from 60 miles south to get to here, which is what she wants in the first place. What I want.
See, that's the thing, you're still focusing on it's
Yeah.
what she wants. You have to look at, do you
You
really?
talked to her, right?
Yeah, and I know the situation, and you have to look, is it what you want?
Right?
It's not about doing it for her. Remember we talked about,
I'm sorry.
Everybody has that
I should
fatal
have skipped
flaw.
today. I should have skipped today. I
That-
should have stayed down there and.
That's
either,
not-
either that or
I'm
find a way
sorry.
to get, it's not up to her to get us where we need to be. You
Last,
know?
You go ahead.
okay, last week I couldn't make it here because traffic in town was terrible. So instead, I went to the Red House to the 12:30 meeting. I couldn't make it up here. I found,
You found another way.
find a way. So I knew there was a 12:30 meeting at the Red House. I called
All
John,
right.
told him I couldn't make it.
I'll buy that.
You told us.
And it is, it's about,
It's about finding a way.
and it's not just a bumper sticker and a beat up cliche when we say go to any lengths. I went to any lengths to find the next drink.
Right.
I can go to any lengths to do what I need to do to get sober.
So what you're saying is, again, we got in like 3 in the morning. I should have found me an AA meeting down there
Today,
Yeah.
today.
Or have a car put there, you should put
Sure.
your car there.
There's
prior
ways
to-
to deal with
It
it.
didn't work out at all. That's, I've got another problem
It's
tonight.
not an
Bob, you
insoluble
gotta understand,
problem.
it's not her responsibility to get you.
But can't she help?
At
She's
this
still-
point, maybe-
she's still-
maybe-
she's still
Maybe
living
at some
there.
point, she'll want
That's
to.
right.
At this
Now you're
point-
backing into the
At
point.
this point, she's tired of it, you know? She's over it.
yeah.
Yeah, but I settled.
And Bob, you gotta understand, you created that
I
situation,
understand it. But
okay?
if I
And
ask
you can't
her
get a
to get
resentment
me
over it.
here,
You know what?
I don't resent it.
You know
You
what?
gotta be, you
Oh,
ask
but
her
it-
to help
but
and she
you
says
do.
no, you gotta be willing to take her answer, not try
And,
to
and
change
say,
it.
okay.
Right.
You know what?
Ask a question.
We owe
Willing to
Robert,
take
we owe Robert Blake one thing. He had a television show years ago called Beretta. And one of the taglines in that was, "Don't do the crime if you can't do the
I
crime."
understand that.
Okay?
All right, so,
Don't-
well,
yeah.
keep going. I'm sorry, guys.
I
You don't want to leave, you can go.
But you know, you're saying you don't have a resentment over it.
But if
But
I,
I think it's apparent to everybody in this room,
Go ahead.
except you, that you do.
You do.
You
This
have a
is-
resentment
This is
over
the
it.
same thing you
I
talk
want
about
help.
every time.
I want help.
It's her. And
Go
it
ahead.
still comes down to,
I hear you.
how willing are you to do this? This is about you taking care of you. You know, and that's the way it has to be. You're looking for an out for if it doesn't work. It's
No,
her
I
fault.
want help. If
Well,
I'm
you
someone
want help,
help,
but
So
you're
what-
also
but
looking
what
for
happens if you
that
don't
out.
get help? You still gotta get sober,
Yeah.
Right,
okay?
all right, keep going, yeah.
okay.
Go ahead.
My husband was an alcoholic for many years. I got him through that. And then now the situation is reversed.
Mhm.
So I have resentment sometimes about, like, I took care of you all those years.
Mhm.
Right.
Why aren't you taking care of me? But he is taking care of me.
I don't have reason.
He is taking care of me. He's seeing that I could. doctor, that I go here, but he
You also
can't
have to take care of
physically,
yourself too.
yeah, he can't physically bring me here.
And sometimes it's not the help, we get the help we need, it's not the help
Yeah,
we want.
exactly.
So,
I mean, he doesn't pat me on the head and say, oh, I'm so
Oh,
glad
good
you
job
went to a
today."
meeting today.
And
But I don't want that, but.
making you responsible for your own actions is one of the
That's
things,
the
one of the ways
That's
to
the
help.
bottom line.
Responsibility.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. So-
But, all right, so here I am, and we'll get even deeper into this. I sailed from Annapolis to Solomons. I have no car. So now I'm trying to arrange,
Mhm.
find a car, I called, well, it was like six this morning. I said, find, either my daughter or you, can someone pick me up and get me here, or to Prince Frederick where I live, so I can get a car and get up here.
Take a taxi,
Have a rental car there.
have a rent-a-car.
You knew the situation before you went.
If somebody was
in.
giving away free booze here today, we'd have figured out a way to get here.
Well, I've been here in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and that's,
There was a guy.
have a good weekend.
Yeah.
I gotta go. See you next time.